Max Verstappen qualified second for the 2026 Miami Grand Prix, his best result of the entire season, and on the same weekend he put points on the board in the sprint race. After everything Red Bull have been through this year, this weekend felt like something genuinely different. Welcome back to Racecraft, and today we are breaking down what happened at Miami across the sprint race and Grand Prix qualifying, why the Red Bull finally looked like a car worth racing, and what all of it means heading into Sunday. Verstappen rolled onto the grid in fifth place for the sprint, and before Miami, fifth would have been a reasonable outcome given how difficult the car had been all season. But this time, fifth felt different, and the lap times told you why before a single race lap had been run. The car looked planted. The pace through qualifying had a sharpness that had been missing for months, and anyone watching closely already sensed the weekend was building towards something. Once the sprint got underway, Lando Norris took control from the front and never gave anyone a realistic look at him. McLaren were simply operating at a level nobody else could reach at the top of the order. But Verstappen was not there to chase Norris. What he was there to do was remind the paddock that when the machinery gives him something to push, the result is a completely different driver. That reminder arrived early when Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton spent the opening laps trading paint through the field, neither one willing to surrender an inch of track. Around lap 8, Verstappen generated a run heading into turn 11, pulled alongside Hamilton, cleared him through the corner, and moved ahead. Red Bull informed him the pass had been completed off the track and that he needed to surrender the position. He backed off and waited, but Hamilton sat directly behind him and refused to come back through. After the race, Verstappen was blunt about the cost. 4 seconds, he said. They lost 4 seconds in a 19-lap sprint because of that confusion, and that is not a minor inconvenience in a format where every lap counts double. What nobody expected was how quickly Verstappen put it right, executing a clean, committed move into turn 17 a few laps later to retake the position cleanly and close out the battle with Hamilton on his own terms. Crossing the line on the road, 5th place was the result. But Kimi Antonelli, who had been running 4th all afternoon, collected 1 track limits warning too many in the closing stages and picked up a 5-second penalty after the checkered flag. That promoted Verstappen into 4th place in the official standings, 4 championship points, and race pace that had not been seen from the Red Bull all year. Across the whole sprint, Verstappen sat only a fraction behind George Russell's Mercedes, and the man and the car were working together again in a way that had felt impossible weeks earlier. Miami was not just a strong weekend from Verstappen. What Red Bull brought to Florida was a statement from the factory. The centerpiece of the upgrade package was their own interpretation of what the paddock has been calling the Macarena wing, a rear wing concept that rotates significantly when the car enters straight-line mode, cutting drag and generating genuine speed on the straights. Alongside that came new side pods, a reworked engine cover and floor, and several other updates distributed across the whole package. Verstappen felt it from the opening session. The car, in his words, was simply allowing him to trust it more. And what followed was arguably the most telling thing he said all weekend. The upgrades had almost halved the gap to the cars at the front. Almost halved in a single weekend, for a driver who had been vocal about just how unmanageable the car had been through the season's earlier rounds. Look at what happened to his teammate to understand how targeted the upgrade was. Isack Hadjar had been a steady presence all season, regularly close to Verstappen in the standings, but at Miami he ended up around a second off Verstappen's pace across both qualifying sessions and openly admitted after the session that he had never been that far behind and could not explain it. The same package that unlocked Verstappen left Hadjar searching for answers. This car, in this specification, had been built around one driver, and that driver arrived in Miami ready to use every bit of it. Saturday evening brought Grand Prix qualifying, the moment the whole weekend had been pointing toward. Q1 was clean and straightforward. Q2 started with a rougher edge when Verstappen came back to the pits unhappy with the tires on his first run and made that clear over the radio, but his second set changed everything and he went fastest in the session, setting himself up perfectly for the top 10 shootout. Q3 then produced something nobody had seen all season. Verstappen's first flying lap put him at the top of the timing screens, provisional pole at the Miami Grand Prix, the kind of moment that had genuinely felt out of reach just a few weeks earlier. Antonelli came back and took it away from him. The young Mercedes driver delivered a lap that nobody on the grid could match, not Verstappen, not Leclerc, not Norris, Russell, or Hamilton. When the final runs concluded, Antonelli had pole and nobody was going to argue with that. But right there alongside him on the front row sat Verstappen in second place, his first front row start of the entire 2026 season. And the detail the raw timing sheet does not capture is that in the final sector of Q3, Verstappen was the quickest driver on the whole grid. He was not just closing on pole, he was arriving for it. And given Kimi's slow race starts throughout this season, Verstappen might be in P1 heading into turn 1, so watch out. After qualifying, he was open about what it meant. The weekend had gone way beyond what he had expected coming in, he said, describing the team pushing hard over the previous weeks to find answers and confirming that it had paid off. The phrase that will stay with anyone who had watched his season to that point was the one he used to describe how the earlier months had felt: a total passenger. A car that could understeer without warning, snap on him, and feel completely alien from one session to the next without anything being changed. Those days, at least for now, appear to be behind him. His own summary landed perfectly. He could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Karun Chandhok on Sky Sports framed the question the whole paddock was already asking: whether Verstappen had found another level as the car improved, and his answer was plain. Verstappen had simply been outstanding. Race engineer Giampiero Lambiase echoed it directly, stating the team had resolved not just performance issues but more fundamental underlying problems with the car, and that Verstappen was feeling genuinely comfortable, something that came through in every single lap he turned across the weekend. Team principal Laurent Mekies had spoken before Miami about the concept of the max effect, the idea that once the car reaches a place where Verstappen can actually push it, he brings something that most drivers on this grid simply cannot produce. Miami was that moment arriving, the max effect switched back on. Going into Sunday, the grid lines up with Antonelli on pole, Verstappen second, Leclerc third, Norris fourth, Russell fifth, and Hamilton sixth. It is the most competitive-looking grid the 2026 season has produced so far, and the race is wide open. Verstappen himself was measured about it, acknowledging the team still has ground to recover. But the tone coming out of Saturday was completely unlike anything heard from him in months. This was not expectation management. This was a man who had just been handed back the tools to do his job, and one who knows exactly what to do with them. After everything this season had sent his way, after all the doubts and the questions about whether this version of Formula One was worth his time, Miami provided an answer. Max Verstappen, on a weekend that finally gave him a car he could trust, was back at the very front of the grid. And now Sunday tells us what comes next. If this video fired you up for the race, hit the like button, subscribe to Racecraft, and drop your winner prediction in the comments. We will see you after the race.